Kurt and Linda stepped into the bustling restaurant, their eyes scanning the room expectantly, eager to unite with their families for a long-awaited dinner. As they entered, they spotted Simon and Rose, Linda's children, sitting at a quiet and isolated booth with Lizzie, Kurt's daughter. Assuming that their partners must have stepped away momentarily or were running late, they approached the table with smiles, unaware of the surprising conversation that awaited them. Kurt smoothly slid into the booth, pulling out a chair and settling down, while Linda followed suit, her gaze briefly scanning the surroundings before joining him. Oblivious to the unusual circumstances, they took their seats, ready to enjoy a joyful evening together, completely unaware of the shocking revelation that was about to unfold. Kurt pulled out a chair and plopped himself down in the booth, greeting the group with a cheerful, "Hey, kids!" Linda, glancing around the restaurant, followed suit and pulled out her own chair before asking, "Where are Scott and Nora?" Simon chimed in, explaining, "We asked them to give us a bit of time with you two alone." Linda's smile widened as she responded, "Do one or two of you have some big news? I guess we should be honored you wanted to tell us first." Lizzie, wearing a serious expression, added, "I think it's more that we wanted to share something that we've learned." Kurt, noticing the change in tone, looked concerned and asked, "You're all sounding so serious. What's going on? Is everything all right?" His gaze shifted to his daughter. Rose, seemingly unfazed by the seriousness of the conversation, interjected with a random statement, "Pineapple fudge," directing her attention towards Linda. Linda's voice caught in her throat, leaving her momentarily speechless. Her face drained of color, resembling a ghostly sheet, as she struggled to process the unfolding conversation. Kurt, utterly bewildered by the sudden turn of events, responded with a puzzled expression, his confusion evident in his voice. "Pineapple fudge? What are you talking about?" Lizzie, seizing the opportunity to shed light on the situation, addressed her father, posing a probing question. "Good question, Dad. Linda, do you want to tell him?" Rose, Linda's daughter, chimed in, adding a touch of sarcasm to her words. "Yes, Mother. Do you want to explain to my father what pineapple fudge means?" Linda, still grappling with the shock of being confronted with such intimate knowledge, stammered as she attempted to gather her thoughts. Wait. Where did you hear about pineapple fudge?" Simon, maintaining a composed facade, interjected, shedding light on the truth with a hint of accusation in his tone. "From your diaries, of course. That's where you write it down, right? This is your secret code, meaning, 'Today I made love to a man who is not my husband but must be his best friend.' Isn't it?" His gaze shifted back and forth between his mother and Kurt, his eyes reflecting the resentment that his tone of voice hid. Rose, sensing the weight of the revelation, expressed a bittersweet sentiment. "I did always wish I had a big sister." As she spoke, she discreetly squeezed Simon's hand, which she had been holding beneath the table. Her gaze shifted to Lizzie, and she added with genuine affection, "And I've known and loved Lizzie my whole life," gently squeezing Lizzie's hand as well. But then, her tone shifted, brimming with disdain as she directed her attention towards Kurt. "But it's still a bit of a shock to hear that we share a biological father, Dad." The weight of her words hung in the air, underscoring the deep sense of betrayal and resentment she felt towards Kurt and Linda, whose actions had shattered the both families' foundation and trust. Simon, his voice tinged with a mixture of frustration and disappointment, confronted Kurt about the truth that had finally come to light. "Did you really think we would never find out? In a world of DNA testing, genetic diseases, and ancestry exploration, you had to know this would come out eventually." Kurt paused, the weight of Simon's words sinking in, before adopting a defensive tone in response. "Look, guys, we're very sorry you had to find out about this, but this doesn't have to change anything. Rose, Simon, I'm still the same Uncle Kurt you've known all your lives." His attempt to reassure them seemed feeble in the face of the shattered trust. Continuing his explanation, Kurt pleaded, "Scott and Nora don't need to know about this. It will only hurt them, and it will do them no good." In his earnestness to protect the stability of their lives, Kurt failed to acknowledge the profound impact the revelation had already had on their family dynamic. Scott's voice cut through the tension, surprising Kurt and Linda as they realized their missing partners had approached the table unnoticed. "Bit too late for that, old friend." "About 3 months too late," Scott declared, pulling out a chair and taking a seat. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, emphasizing the depth of the betrayal. Nora joined them at the table, her face etched with anger and disappointment. "Besides, Scott found out first and told me before we jointly decided to tell the kids." She took a seat, her movements exuding a sense of controlled rage. Nora's voice carried a seething anger as she confronted Linda directly, her words laced with a cutting edge. "And after the weekend we've had, I really don't think no good is fair." She smirked at Linda, her expression a mixture of resentment and fury. "Linda, I can't fathom what was going through that wretched mind of yours. You traded in a Michelin-starred chocolate ganache for a stale, dried-out piece of pineapple fudge. I'm glad the kids insisted on the extra time because I could barely manage the walk here from our hotel room." Her words dripped with a fiery anger as she expressed her sheer disbelief and disappointment at Linda's actions. Kurt's shock quickly transformed into anger as he processed the truth. His voice trembled with a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. "Wait, you and Scott, you're having an affair?" Rose, though angry, couldn't help but let out a bitter giggle at the irony of Kurt's reaction. "You're really upset about this? Hypocrite much?" Her words carried a hint of sarcasm, emphasizing the double standard she perceived. Linda, slowly regaining her composure, interjected with a composed yet resolute tone. "Wait, hold on. If the two of you have been together, then we're even. You've got your revenge." She met the accusing gazes of her children, partners, and friend. "Now we have to figure out how to move forward and work on rebuilding both our families." There was a glimmer of determination in her eyes as she took on the role of setting the direction for the entire group. Linda's voice grew stronger as she continued, her determination guiding her words. "This doesn't have to change anything. Kurt and I will end our affair, and you both will stop yours. We can all move past this." Her words held a sense of conviction, as if she were determined to pave the way for healing and rebuilding in the face of the shattered trust. Scott's eyes flickered with a mixture of shock and intense anger as he listened to Linda's attempt to level the playing field. His voice dripped with bitterness as he responded, "Well, that's a fair point, my dear. Or it would be if it weren't completely moronic." He paused, his anger simmering beneath the surface. His words came out in a torrent of hurt and betrayal. "You've been having an affair for 20 years with this sack of shit. You made a baby together and told me it was mine. Nora and I have been friends, close friends that whole time, but have never once done anything inappropriate. How the fuck does that make us even?" Linda's puzzlement was evident as she responded. "She just said you spent the weekend together." Nora's mocking tone cut through the air as she retorted, "We did. And it was magical. Honey, it turns out that at our age, not all guys are one and done. Not by a long way." She smirked, clearly enjoying the opportunity to taunt her husband. Rose playfully chimed in, interjecting with an, "Ew, Mom, TMI." Had Linda been in a more stable frame of mind, she would have noticed her daughter had referred to another woman as Mom, but she didn't pick up the change in the midst of her confusion. She would understand soon enough. Scott's voice hardened as he continued, his words laced with a hint of triumph. "But you're wrong, Sandy. We never had an affair, because by the very first time I touched Nora intimately, we had both already filed formal divorce papers. You two were too busy on your weekend fuckfest business trip for us to bother serving you, but..." He raised his hand, gesturing toward a man standing by the door, an air of resolution in his voice. The atmosphere grew tense as an unknown man responded to Scott's gesture and approached the table. He wasted no time in delivering his message, his voice cold and formal. "Linda Davis, Kurt Willis, you've been served." He handed each of them a brown manila envelope, their contents not a mystery. The man then stepped back, pulling out a camera to capture the moment before nodding at Scott and making his exit, leaving the group stunned and bewildered. Silence enveloped the table as Kurt and Linda exchanged glances, their minds racing to comprehend the sudden turn of events. The weight of those envelopes held the potential to unravel their lives completely, adding another layer of uncertainty to an already tumultuous situation. Linda's composure crumbled, her voice trembling with desperation and tears streaming down her face. "I don't want a divorce. This isn't how it's supposed to happen. Kurt and I aren't in love. It didn't mean anything. I love you, Scott. I always loved only you." Her words were filled with anguish as she pleaded with her husband, hoping to salvage their shattered relationship. Turning to her children, Linda's gaze shifted from Scott to Rose and Simon, her voice choked with emotion. "Luce, Simony, tell your father that this doesn't have to destroy your family." Her pleas were directed at her children, hoping they could bridge the gap between their broken parents. Kurt, seated silently, appeared completely shattered, his face reflecting the immense pain he carried. He seemed lost, unable to find the right words to express the depths of his remorse and regret. In a silent act of solidarity and support, Scott, Nora, Simon, Rose, and Lizzie all placed their hands on the table, interlocking their fingers. Their united display showed their commitment to one another, acknowledging the challenge that lay ahead and providing each other with the strength and support needed to face the future. Scott's stern voice cut through the room, commanding attention and signaling that it was time for Linda to listen. The weight of the decision made by the five of them was made clear. "Sandy, I think it's time for you to shut up and listen. The five of us have been discussing how to proceed for a month. Our ducks are all lined up, and as far as I'm concerned, none of this is up for negotiation." Lizzie, her tone resolute, interjected, confirming the unity of their decision. "We've all thought about this long and hard individually, and then leaned on each other to decide how to proceed. On this, we are unanimous." She glanced at Simon and Rose, acknowledging their collective efforts. "I will just add that the three of us came up with this, and your spouses tried to dissuade us initially." Simon, speaking with a sense of maturity and determination, emphasized the gravity of the situation. "My baby sister may be the youngest one at the table, but she's an adult now and has a wise head on her shoulders. She's also the most directly affected by this, so she's asked that she be the one to tell you how things are going to be moving forward." Rose, sniffling but gathering her strength, delivered her words with a mix of pain and resolution. "In short, they are not." She turned to Kurt, her voice firm and final. "Kurt, you may have provided the DNA for the test, but you never were and never will be my father." Her gaze returned to Linda, her expression hardened. "Linda, you have been my mother my whole life. Not as good a mother as Dad has been a father, but my mother nonetheless. Well, that ends tonight. From this point forward, you and I have no relationship. I don't want to speak to you, read a message from you, or have any contact whatsoever. This may change in the future, but I wouldn't bet on it. If it does, it will be my decision. I'm sure you won't acquiesce, but my wish is that neither of you ever contact me ever again. I can assure you that I will not respond." Simon, gazing at his shattered and almost catatonic mother, echoed Rose's sentiment. "The same applies to me." Lizzie, determined and resolute, added her voice to the decision. "And me, too." Nora, speaking with a sense of finality, addressed the practical aspect of their decision. Scott and I share a lawyer, whose details are in those envelopes in your hand. For us, all contact should now be through them." The table fell into an uneasy silence as the weight of their words settled in. The path forward had been laid out, and the ramifications of their choices would undoubtedly reshape their lives. Scott, after a significant pause, allowed the weight of the silence to sink in, giving Linda and Kurt a moment to process the gravity of what had been revealed. Breaking the silence, he addressed the next matter. "All 8 grandparents have been informed about this earlier today," Scott stated, his tone serious. He turned his gaze towards Linda. "Your parents," he nodded, "and yours," indicating Kurt, "have done nothing wrong, and we don't want to write them out of their grandchildren's lives." There was a sense of caring and consideration in his words, as he had always respected and loved his in-laws. Scott's voice carried a firmness as he continued, emphasizing the conditions attached. "However, their continued involvement is contingent upon their acceptance of this situation. They will not pass any messages from you to the kids, nor will they provide you with updates on any aspect of our lives." He made it clear that the boundaries set for Linda and Kurt extended to their parents as well. "While they may choose to maintain a relationship with you, it cannot in any way interfere or influence our family dynamics. Kurt, your mom and dad are keen to get to know their new granddaughter better, and will definitely be supportive of Rose getting to know them. It won't be a surprise, given how great they are, that as far as my parents are concerned, this changes nothing. They love Rose more than the world, and nothing will ever change that." The once unified family structures had been forever altered, and the boundaries established would reshape the relationships not only between Linda, Kurt, and their children, but also between their parents and the grandchildren. Nora's voice carried a simmering anger as she responded to the situation at hand. "We aren't moving. This isn't New York or LA. We may come across each other at a restaurant or on the street." Her tone was filled with a sense of warning and a clear boundary. With palpable restraint, Nora continued, her voice laced with frustration. "I'd strongly urge you both to pretend you don't know me. It has taken all my self-control not to smack you both silly here tonight." The depth of her anger was evident, and it was clear that maintaining composure in future encounters, or even in this one should it continue much longer, might prove to be a challenge. Lizzie's voice then took on a more positive, albeit forced, tone as she continued. "But in one sense, Linda, you were right." Her words hung in the air, capturing the attention of everyone at the table. A noticeable shift occurred as Lizzie addressed Aunt Linda, dropping the familiar term of endearment and referring to her simply as Linda. It was a subtle yet significant indication of the strained relationship between them. She paused briefly before delivering the unexpected news, her tone still laced with a mixture of emotions. "There is good news to share. 2 bits of good news, actually. Simon and I are getting married, and it will be soon because, in about 7 months, we're going to be joined by your first grandchild." For a fleeting moment, Linda's eyes sparkled with a glimmer of joy upon hearing the news, but the weight of the previous discussion quickly dampened her excitement. Similarly, Kurt's hopeful expression faltered as he realized the complex implications of the situation. Simon, bypassing any facade of positivity, spoke bluntly, his voice filled with a mix of frustration and determination. "The 2 of us talked and talked about how your betrayal affected our relationship. It's really weird that we now realize we have a half-sister, but at the end of the day, you've always told us we've been inseparable since the first day we met at playgroup." His words held a hint of bitterness, but also a resolute refusal to let their parents' actions destroy the bond they shared. "While that will always be stained by the fact that it was also where you both first met, there's no reason to allow your appalling behavior to wreck our connection." Lizzie's voice held a mix of vulnerability and determination as she addressed the unexpected news of her impending motherhood. The baby was unexpected, and it's sooner than we had originally planned, but we have always wanted to have a family. Her words carried a sense of sincerity, reflecting the underlying desire for stability and love amidst the chaos. She continued, her voice gaining strength. Our parents, the two that remain, are very supportive of our decision to start our family now. Lizzie emphasized the support they had received from Scott and Nora, who stood by them in this pivotal moment. Their parents' unwavering support provided a glimmer of hope amid the turmoil, a reminder that there were still foundations of love and care that could be relied upon. Simon's words were filled with a resolute determination as he continued to address the consequences of his parents' actions. His voice carried a mix of sadness and conviction. But regardless of what you may believe about how things will change in the future, know this, Simon asserted, his tone unwavering. You will not be present at our wedding. You will not be present for the birth of your first grandchild or any that follow. You will not spoil them, play with them, or babysit them to give us a night off. His words painted a picture of the boundaries and limitations that were now firmly in place. He glanced towards Nora, a mix of emotions on his face, before continuing, You won't get photos of them. Hear their first words, or catch them when they fall. The weight of these words was palpable, illustrating the profound loss that would be experienced by both parties. Simon's tone shifted slightly as he addressed Kurt directly. They will not share your names. There was a firmness in his voice, an acknowledgement of the consequences of Kurt's actions. He looked towards Scott, a glimmer of appreciation and respect in his eyes. Mom, he addressed Nora, trying on the new way of referring to her for the first time. The subtle change in address carried a depth of meaning, signaling a shift in their relationship. Simon's voice softened as he acknowledged the burden that would now fall on Scott and Nora. Mom and Dad will have to cover the burden of being the sole grandparents. Despite the gravity of the conversation, Nora couldn't help but smile at the thought of becoming a grandparent, and by Simon calling her Mom. With a final blow, Simon delivered his last words to Kurt. Kurt, you won't be walking Lizzie down the aisle. That honor will go to Dad. Bluntly, you've already given away the right to give her away. The weight of those words resonated in the air, underscoring the profound impact of Kurt's actions on his familial bonds and the loss of a cherished moment. Scott's voice carried a firm resolve as he addressed the issue of these changes becoming more widely known. We have done nothing wrong, and so we do not intend to hide the reasons behind the fracture of our marriages from friends and acquaintances. Rose's resentment bubbled up as she spoke, her words laced with frustration. I want people to know. I want people to know why I have completely excised you from my life, Mother, so that you are the one judged harshly, not me. Her desire for others to understand the weight of her decision reflected her need for validation and acknowledgement. Taking a moment to collect herself, Rose's tone softened slightly. I don't want you at my graduation next month. It's a public event, and I can't stop you from attending. Her voice held a mix of determination and concern for her reputation. But I have earned the respect of my teachers and the parents of my friends, and I don't want to lose that by spitting on you if you show up. Her desire to maintain her dignity in a public setting, while ensuring the boundaries she had set, was clear. Lizzie chimed in with a wry smile, injecting a touch of humor into the tense atmosphere. If Mom hasn't decked you already, that is. Her words carried a hint of amusement, suggesting that the repercussions for their not listening to their wishes might be severe and physical. As one, the five rose from their seats, leaving Linda and Kurt in the wake of their shattered world. Scott paused, his words carrying a mix of strength and determination. One final thing, Scott began, his gaze focused on the cheating, soon-to-be ex-spouses. "I've had a loving friendship with this woman for 20 years. It's not going to take much to flip that to a loving relationship." He gestured towards Nora, acknowledging the depth of their connection. "I'd already fallen in love with her, just from her support over the last 3 months." He looked directly at Linda and Kurt, his tone unwavering. "Your betrayal is not going to break me, and I'm not going to let it break her." There was a resolute defiance in his words, a refusal to succumb to the pain inflicted upon them. Scott's voice carried a touch of conviction as he expressed his vision for the future. "You may have laughed at us behind our back for the last 20 years, but for the next 50, I will be laughing with her." He emphasized the joy and happiness that awaited them, free from the burdens of their shattered relationships. With a turn towards Nora, Scott's tone softened, filled with vulnerability. "Nora, I've fallen in love with you. It's too soon to expect you to feel the same way, but I want you to give me a chance to make you feel the same way." His words held a plea, a request for patience and an opportunity to build something new. "And when you do," Scott continued, his voice growing stronger, "I want us to commit before God and our children our futures to each other." He emphasized the sacredness of their commitment, acknowledging the weight of the vows they had taken in their previous marriages. "Our partners may not have taken their vows seriously, but we did, and we should have the right to enjoy taking and giving those vows to someone that feels them as deeply as we each do." It's impossible to tell whether Scott was right or wrong. When he first started speaking, it is possible that it was too soon for Nora to feel the same depth of feeling that he had for her. But looking at her teary smile, it would have been apparent to anyone looking that. By the time she had heard his declaration, she clearly felt the same way. Linda and Kurt were left to grapple with the aftermath of their actions, while Scott and Nora, with their arms around each other, followed their 3 children out of the door. United and ready to forge a new path together, guided by love and the determination to find happiness amidst the ruins. Subscribe to our channel to keep your partner from cheating on you, and listen to the next story because this story is nothing compared to the next.